All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us for this month's Doctor is in Call. I'm super excited to be here with Ryan and Anna. It's hot and sweltering in Omaha, and I'm sure it's worse in St. Louis. You guys are in the news because of that airport fiasco. Holy cow. But we could talk about that another time. Ryan and Anna, let's just jump right in. It's the first half of the year is over. Let's look in the rearview mirror. We've had tariffs, we've had most favored nation. We've had the big, beautiful bill,
Mhm.
earnings season starting. Let's rehash this year. What did we see? What stood out to you?
It's been from a macro perspective, there's been a lot. And in some ways, though, it's better to have this all out at once and digest it all at once rather than have this trickle one item at a time for the next year, 18 months, however long. And so let's just do a quick recap. There's been two main themes, if you will, issues that have impacted healthcare in the first half of the year. The first one is managed care. So think about United Healthcare, Centene, Molina, and others. This was supposed to be the year managed care sort of got its groove back. And we had digested all of the high patient utilization in 2024. We set rates accordingly, and we were going to be off to the races. And oh, by the way, not really any tariff impact in managed care. So it looked like a good investment entering the year. And UNH really put a halt on that and called into question, boy, maybe these companies don't have the patient utilization under control, and therefore they've underbid or misbid the insurance for 2025. And that's largely played out. We've seen United Healthcare in really spectacular fashion reset guidance twice in a month. Never would have thought in a million years United Healthcare you'd see that out of them. Centene has followed after that. Molina has followed after that. And we're about to enter the second quarter earnings cycle here. So we're going to get updates from all the other insurers. So that's going to be one thing to watch. Having all of those companies in the headlines certainly has not helped the sector for the first half of the year. The good news is it's out of the way. Now it's time to digest. So when there's maximum fear, maximum pain, low multiples, low trough earnings, now's the opportunity to sniff around and to look and to build off of that. And so as we get into second quarter reporting, we can look out in the next 6 months, we can start to look out into 2026. Can these companies show investors that this is the floor and let's build from there? So
Hmm.
issue number one, we're closer to the end of that than we are to the beginning. So that's a positive. Issue number two is all the other stuff that you see on your screen. Most favored nation, FDA, Medicare, the big beautiful bill, not listed on here, but certainly an impact. A similar theme that I would tell everyone to look to. We're closer to the end on all of these items than we are to the beginning, and that is a positive. If you think about the big beautiful bill, what was the concern there? It was Medicaid. We're going to cut Medicaid by how much? Who's it going to impact? We now have those answers. It's over a 10-year period. If you annualize it out, it's an $80 billion number a year. Actually, in the big scope of Medicaid, not a significant cut. So potential impact to hospitals, there's potential impacts in the space, but certainly not devastating, and we can build off of this. Most favored nation, we have some of the details. We're still waiting on some others. Pharmaceutical tariffs, this is the big one we don't have yet. We're waiting on it. President Trump has alluded over the past couple of days that this may be coming by the end of July. So hopefully by August 1st, fingers crossed for all of us in the healthcare world that we have the number, we know the impact, and then we can factor it into our models and move forward. J&J's call this morning, they were asked a question about pharmaceutical tariffs. Really, at least for the big players, they have maneuverability. They can pivot where their manufacturing is. They have opportunities. And especially important is going to be how quickly are these implemented? President Trump has suggested that we may give a grace period here while this builds up. That gives time, that gives these companies time to adjust and to minimize the impact, get manufacturing back into the states if they need to. And so I think we're actually, for all the consternation we've seen in healthcare in the first half of the year, we're in a better spot. We're in a better spot.
Oh, that's great to hear. Well, hopefully closure will come and there's only one way. It seems like you're implying let's get to the point where there's only one direction to go, and that is up or forward or whatever the positive direction
Yeah,
is.
you got, when there's all this uncertainty, and we've used that word too many times in the past 6 months and beyond, you got to just look for the opportunities. And this is not new to healthcare. Think about the last 10, 15, 20 years, all the changes we've had in healthcare. There's always periods of fear. It's just that the breadth that we're seeing this time is unique with so much happening across Medicaid, the FDA, the NIH, most favored nations, pharmaceutical tariffs. We go on and on and on. Boy, that's unique. And now once we get it behind us, that's great. Let's build off of that. And really our job as healthcare investors is to lean in these periods where we see opportunity and set us up well for the next 1 to 2 years coming out of it.
Yeah,
That's really the
sounds good to
opportunity.
me. Well, let's do it. Well, Anna, I wanted to switch gear. We've been bugging you about GLP-1 stuff forever. I want to take a break. Everyone needs a break from GLP-1. It's time to talk about psychedelics. It's better than news, better the Joe Rogan show. Tell us about psychedelics. I know there's some new drugs and some new companies that are coming out. What do we need to know?
Yeah, well, this is a really interesting space, and I agree with you. We need a break from GLP-1s. You know, they don't make you happier. I think that something that could help with depression, in this case, treatment-resistant depression, is a lot more useful than something that helps you lose weight in some cases. So happy to talk about it. And one of the reasons we want to bring it up now, you know, these trials have been in progress for years. We've known about them for years, but it's only in the last few months with the changes at the FDA that suddenly the agency has become much more positive on the space of psychedelics, mostly in application to things like PTSD and treatment-resistant depression, but they're also being tried in different types of anxieties, generally mood disorders. And so this renewed interest is really wonderful for the field because psychedelics have long been maligned and kind of grouped in with this class of illicit drugs, right? They are scheduled in the United States. However, since the early 2000s, there's kind of been a renewed effort, even though they are very regulated, there's been a renewed effort in academia in the US and outside the US to conduct studies applying psychedelics to mood disorders. And the data has really been interesting and shows support for their use there. And so I do just want to show a little figure here at the bottom. This is from a study conducted at WashU a few years ago. And essentially, what it's saying is that patients came in and had a certain baseline brain function. These are fMRI brain scans that show activity. And so the brighter yellow is higher activity areas of the brain. So you have baseline as pre, and then post psilocybin means that they've been given a dose of psilocybin, which is the active ingredient in magic mushrooms, right? And then essentially the group compared post to pre and shows these persistent changes, one dose of drug, and then 3 weeks later, how has brain activity changed? And you know, forget about what these brain regions do, how they're being affected by the drug. The fact is that there are persistent changes in the brain from a single dose of psilocybin. And I think that alone is just mind-blowing. And then when we start to look into what brain regions are those, how they might be impacting mood, cognition, plasticity, it just gets even more interesting. And so a few weeks ago, we had phase 3 data from a company called Compass Pathways, the ticker is CMPS. And it essentially showed in a large randomized controlled trial that a synthetic psilocybin derivative can actually really help patients who have treatment-resistant depression. And so that kind of is getting the ball rolling. They will be the first ones to submit an application to this new FDA.
How big was the study, if and how many participants were in it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know off the top of my head, but they're very easy to find online, and I can look up that data and get it back to you.
Okay. Man, that's crazy. We need to do an hour-long podcast to explain why.
We
Why is
definitely
that
can do
happening?
a deeper dive. It is fascinating. Yeah.
Yes.
And I know that people are really interested in the actual data. And so I did just pull two really comparable um, figures, one from each of these companies. Compass Pathways, the one that I just mentioned, and then another one that's earlier in development called Atai Life Sciences, ticker is ATAI. They're in phase 2, whereas Compass is in phase 3, right? So slightly more advanced. But they both use the same scale of measuring depression, which is the MADRS scale, MADRS. And this is a multi-part scale where patients answer questions about their daily life and how they feel. And it's essentially a reliable, broadly used measure of depression. And
Hmm.
so for both of these drugs, you can see that with a single dose, this is just one dose for each company of their drug, you get a really fast drop in their MADRS score, which means an improvement in those depression symptoms. And then you see that it stays durable without additional doses. And so Atai has about 8 weeks here, Compass has about 12. So it's just so interesting. And again, this is related to the data that I just showed you on the last slide, where there seems to be a persistency of effect here, which we don't fully understand, but we're learning a lot about. And so I think this is super interesting. And then one
Yeah.
point where these companies differ that is also very interesting is the trip. So I know, when we say psychedelics, everyone's like, oh, you're tripping, you're seeing things that aren't there, you're totally hallucinating. So that is true for both of these compounds. The difference is that Compass has an 8-hour trip, whereas Atai has about a 2-hour trip. And so the kinetics of these experiences are so different. They may also be slightly different subjectively. We don't really know yet, right? We need more data for that. But both of them do involve an experience, and both of those experience sessions need to be conducted under supervision with a
Mhm.
therapist. So when we start to think about the potentially, if these are approved, the long road ahead for these therapies, that's a really big part of it, right? Like, is it economically, practically feasible to conduct an 8-hour or even a 2-hour session in addition to a patient's typical burden with going to therapy, seeing their doctors, taking their existing medications? And so as we start to think about, okay, the data is really exciting. Well, one, is the FDA going to approve it? If they do, is the DEA going to unschedule the drug or lower the scheduling to be less severe? Another question mark. Once the DEA makes its decision, each state can then decide what to do. So state by state, right? Just like with marijuana products.
Mm.
And then we start to think about, in the clinic, what's that going to look like? How are therapists going to be trained? How are we going to, produce educational materials to reduce stigma? And so this image on the right, I'm using because I feel like it does evoke what we think of when we say psychedelics. But I think that that may start to change as we get more education about the medical benefits of the products.
Yes, I have a million questions, but I'm not going to ask any of them for the sake of our call today. But I do notice if I just pull up CMPS and ATAI, the stock performance for the year are very different. Do these companies do other medicines and other treatments as well, or is this their sole focus for now?
This is their sole focus for now, although each does have other pipeline products. These are like the treatment-resistant depression are their lead assets, the most
Okay.
impactful for each company. The difference is really about their phase of development, right? So Compass just
Uh,
finished their phase 3 trial. They now need additional funding to submit and launch and hire a sales force. So it's a completely different stage of the life cycle, essentially, of a biotech company versus Atai, which is only in phase 2, nowhere near launching, and has a different cash balance
gotcha.
for their
Okay.
future.
Gotcha. Awesome
These things
stuff. Thank
change over time, and we're talking about psychedelics, but back in 2001, GW Pharma had a drug for epilepsy that was a cannabis-based drug,
Yeah.
and that was a lot. There was a lot of controversy around that and getting that on the market, and patients who unfortunately had epilepsy, what they were doing to get the drug. Sort of, on the black market, if you will, before it was legalized. And Jazz ended up coming and buying GW Pharma for over $7 billion. So these things change and evolve over time, and
Yeah.
sometimes it doesn't take very long.
Yeah, no, this is super fun. Well, let's end on one way different note. We haven't seen a ton of M&A activity in the sector, hardly at all. But we did finally see one here in July, and it was a big one. We had Merck acquire Verona Pharma for $10 billion, $107 a share, a 23% premium. That's a good deal. Is sign of things to come, one off. And if I'm not mistaken, this is Verona has commercial products. Like this isn't a take a flyer on a hopeful company, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, you're right, Jonathan. They do have commercialized assets, a product in COPD, supposed to do about $400+ million of revenue in 2025, but growing significantly in what's a very large end market. And this is not the first uh, deal we've had in small biotech this year that's been for a commercialized asset.
Hmm.
Intracellular therapeutics, ITCI comes to mind as one of the others. Um, that was purchased by Johnson and Johnson, pretty big deal for Caplyta. And so we have seen this trend, this pivot, if you will, from large pharma looking at, phase 1, phase 2 assets bolstering their pipeline to now making more of a sure bet let's pay up a little bit, bring an asset in-house that we know its place in the market. We know it's growing, we know it's used by patients. And when we look out across what is coming next, we don't see a whole lot. So there's durability to those assets. So large pharma desires change over time, and right now we are certainly in a paradigm of we want commercialized assets.
Well, let's hope it's the first of many, because Verona, we've had our eye on that for a while, and kudos to them for getting gobbled up by the big boys. So good job, Verona. See,
It was a great run for that management team from that stock. They did a nice
awesome.
job. They didn't mess up the launch, which is something we often see. They did a good job and deserving of the takeout premium.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Well, let's end there. Thank you guys so much. It's hopefully, like you said, all those things to lead off our call. We're in the second half of the year, which is crazy. It's almost back to school time, which I'm not ready for. But we're second half of the year. We've got earnings, and hopefully come August, we'll have some closure on some of the tariff stuff and be moving forward with positive things that are going on in the world. Thank you guys so much for the time today.
Thank you.
See ya.